Welcome to Bicycle Retail Radio, the bicycle industry podcast that brings retailers, vendors, advocates, and thought leaders to the mic for honest discussions about the latest issues facing retailers while taking an in-depth look at the person within the profession.
Registration is officially open, and we want you to join us for the second annual NBDA Retailer Summit, May 22nd and 23rd in Bentonville, Arkansas. Our 2024 program features 2 dynamic days of presentations, panel discussions, and breakout sessions aimed to unite retailers and suppliers in conversation. Tickets include an event gift bag, tailored educational events, networking cocktail event and select meals, early access to the Bentonville Bike Fest, not to mention ample riding time on world-class trails. You won't want to miss it, so don't. Get registered today at nbda.com.
Welcome. I'm Heather Mason, NBDA President. This is the NBDA News Hour, co-hosted with our friends from Human Powered Solutions. Today, I'm joined by Chad Picard, NBDA P2 moderator. Welcome, Chad.
Hello, Heather.
Today, we'll be joined by micromobility experts Jay Townley, Fred Clements, and Mike Fritz.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
The team at Human Powered Solutions has over 245 years of experience. Considered the data wizards. Their monthly newsletter, the Micromobility Reporter, is a dynamic resource for the industry, featuring timely news and in-depth analysis about the latest in human-powered transportation, including bicycles, e-bicycles, e-scooters, and rideshare. Included is a focus on supply chain issues, technology, and both business and consumer trends that drive the marketplace.
I love our monthly news feature that focuses on the articles contained within this report that Chad is mentioning, getting a more in-depth view and firsthand seats with the experts. If you want to receive the email version of this resource, I highly suggest you visit humanpoweredsolutions.com and sign up to do that. So let's dive in. There's so much to get into today. The title of the March newsletter, E-Bike Hate, Legislation and Liability for Amazon. Seems that from the title, the current state of affairs is less than mellow. Jay, what can you tell us?
Well, as we've discussed, the market that we do business in the specialty bike retail business, is still viable and vibrant in the sense that consumer purchases are still good. The market still looks good. Just this past week, the Fed, in form of its chairman, Jerome Powell, said that they will be doing rate cuts, but they're not going to do them now. They're going to be put off for a bit. Market speculates June or July for the first one of 3 potential rate cuts that the Federal Reserve will make. But in the meantime, from the standpoint of the market, the Fed continues to do what it said it would do, which is slow the market, slow retail, slow everything in our economy down so that inflation will continue to cool. Their target being 2%. We're somewhere about 3.4 at this point. And in the bicycle business, we're seeing duality. And that is simply that as the market is seen, we've got a portion of the market now estimated by economists at about 10% that had a hard landing. And this is the lower income brackets, to the upper income brackets that are still cooking along fine with kind of the rest of us stuck in the middle. And in the bicycle business case, we're in an economy that is very uncertain. We are not quite sure where it's going to end up. And we do know, because of the feedback from the industry, particularly the Taipei show, which ended this month, the industry has got a glut of inventory that it's still trying to siphon off. And I was talking to Mike earlier today, that glut of inventory, because of correspondence and stringers that we know that were at the Taipei show, is extending back into all of the tertiary supply channels or sources in Asia. So it's the parts that are clogging up, the components that are clogging up the works before you get to an OEM an OEM that's got too much, and then in turn, a customer of theirs in the United States in particular that's got too much. And so the whole of the supply channel at this point is trying to deal with an inventory problem that extends beyond this month, and we're in the third month of the new year. So, part of what we're seeing in this past newsletter is an economic situation that A, is uncertain, B, for the bicycle industry, is showing an inventory problem that now, as we opine by looking at the articles in the last reporter, is probably the end of 2024 or early 2025 before we see what would be a more consumer-driven demand market.
Thanks, Jay. It's always great to get an overview from you, summarizing the current state of affairs. And
As gloomy as that was.
yeah, I mean, being at the CABDA shows and seeing the news of Trek and just staying in close conversations with retailers and suppliers alike, there's a lot of uncertainty. And yeah, we're just gonna keep chugging away and working as hard as we can and keeping our eye on everything.
Heather, I love your phrase, less than mellow. I think that's true. The way I kind of look at it, it's never really mellow in retail. It's always hard work and challenging. And so to me, it helps to try to break things into categories. What are the usual troubles? And so I would say, supplier relations, margins, staff, you're always having trouble with that. Trends in retail, each has a separate driver and status. And then there are things that are unusual, which I think we're facing now. The COVID hangover has led to a glut of inventory, and consumer demand is down, largely maybe because the market is satiated because of all the sales we made during the COVID thing. And then some are actually disruptive, I would say. And so technology, I'm not sure how that's going to disrupt. AI, things that are just disrupting society. And then e-bikes, for the first time, our industry is embracing or trying to motorized vehicles in our retail stores. And that's, I think, disruptive long-term because the legislative implications are different than for just human-powered bikes alone. And, so I think there's a lot going on, and some of it I think is transformational. Some of it is the usual headaches, but it's not mellow.
No, definitely not mellow. Less than mellow.
So let's dive into the article on Amazon. Should Amazon be responsible for everything it sells and ships? A U.S. agency will soon decide. From the Wall Street Journal, a summary for our listeners is that Amazon will be facing the same liability as retailers soon, which would help in the long game regulate items sold, leading to safer products. Mike, Jay, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'll lead very quickly that this is indicative of the change that we're seeing in the overall market. And when Mike and I were practitioners in product safety and governmental affairs back in the day at Schwinn, we were actually schooled by very good attorneys in the antitrust laws of this country. But antitrust has fallen out of favor, if you will. So in the last 16 to 20 years, you young folks haven't heard anywhere near the amount of enforcement of antitrust. You don't hear about the Federal Trade Commission going after or fining or suing companies like Apple. As we just saw most recently, Apple's been sued by the U.S. government for antitrust violations. So that's part of what's going on here. Now, the agency referred to in the article, to me, is very interesting. It's the United States Consumer Product Safety Commission. And so the only thing that's lacking here is there was a judgment. Amazon, at this particular point in time, has got itself positioned so it does not have in its resale community, where they sell a third-party product to us as consumers, do not have the same responsibility as a bike dealer or as a distributor and supplier to a bike dealer. In other words, by law, they're not a distributor, they're not a retailer, therefore they are not responsible for either the compliance to standards for that product, nor the product safety of that product. And that would be compliance to safety norms or safety regulations. So what the United States Consumer Product Safety Commission did is went after Amazon using, I think, 3 or 4 products just as examples of the thousands of products that they have under their umbrella. And they got a judgment from a trial judge. And I should say actually an arbitrator judge, an arbitrarial judge. And they're now simply waiting for the commissioners to render an opinion. And if they render that opinion that Amazon is indeed a distributor, is Amazon, I think, will rightly so have to belly up and be responsible for the products that are handled through their third-party program. So that lithium-ion batteries, e-bikes, bicycles, all will have to be on the same level as we're selling as specialty bike retailers, as we in the NBDA are selling, as your membership is selling, as the suppliers to your membership are selling, which I think is only right. That Amazon should take full responsibility as a distributor for the quality, more importantly for the safety, and for the meeting of standards to safety requirements of the products they sell. So that's what's going on here. And we're literally weeks away from the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission reaching a decision and rendering its final decision relative to this going into effect.
If I could add to that, Jay, I think Amazon is basically making its own bed. They're doing things today that we've heard reported that imply that they aren't using good business practices. You know, everyone knows that New York City has banned the sale of lithium-ion batteries, low-cost lithium-ion batteries coming in from China. And basically Amazon's reaction to that, if you're sitting in Manhattan and you want to order an inexpensive e-bike battery pack, you can go to their website, and the website will advise you, once you put in your address, that they can't sell to you because you're in New York. Okay, so you go across the river into New Jersey, you can get that battery pack with no problems whatsoever. So everyone acknowledges and understands the fact that the heart of this e-bike fire situation, lithium-ion battery fire situation, are sub-quality battery packs that are manufactured without using appropriate cells or proper testing and certification, et cetera, et cetera. And they reacted to the New York law saying, okay, we can't sell to New York. But at the same time, they have no problem whatsoever shipping that same battery that's been banned in New York into New Jersey or any place else. So it's not like they're working to purge the marketplace of dangerous product. They're just sending it wherever it's not banned. And I think that's irresponsible, and there needs to be some accountability here.
So thinking about this question and going maybe the other direction, what if Amazon is not held responsible? Does that change does that set a precedent for other distributors in our bike industry that maybe they can claim that they're just a 3PL and they don't have any responsibility for the products they distribute?
It might. I seriously doubt it at this point, or those distributors would have done that already. Or I guess put the other way around, the distributors that were going to do it have done it. So the D2Cs and those that are particularly third-party sellers, if they were going to follow the Amazon example, they've done it or not. And one of the examples of or not would be Walmart, which has a third-party sale arrangement with many people and many brands, but yet they've shown a degree of responsibility that is different than the Amazon degree of responsibility relative to the claim that they are not a distributor, that they are not a retailer. They don't fall into the same governance from the standpoint of regulation or law. But yes, Chad, you raise a good point that if Amazon prevails ultimately, there probably will be some other people because we're in desperate times for many folks in the bike industry. This inventory problem goes through all of the channels of trade, including D2C. So yeah, there might be. But I think ultimately we're going to come back to this question because as you've seen recently in the news, there are more and more actions being taken by both the Justice Department and the FTC and other regulatory agencies to get back to a time when there was much more fairness and I believe this is an old guy that's watched this for decades. I believe we're getting back to a point where there's much more fairness, particularly for consumers and consumer safety in our marketplace. I think ultimately that's going to prevail, but there may be bumps and grinds, and certainly along the way there may be decisions that we're not happy with.
Okay.
Definitely one to keep our eye on. And I am, for one, happy to see some regulation and rules being brought forward for Amazon and the way they're doing business. And I think it'll help in the broad scheme of things when it comes to addressing these safety issues that we're all working so hard on. I want to stay on e-bikes. I thought it was great to see New York State start up their statewide lithium-ion battery safety campaign. This was covered in Bicycle Retailer Industry News, and I'm glad that you covered it in your report. The Buy Safe, Charge Safe campaign officially started in March, and there's a website that includes information for consumers on lithium-ion battery-powered items like e-bikes and e-scooters, what to look for when buying, safe usage and disposal. There's educational videos. It's really a dynamic website. I've checked it out. Mike, what are your thoughts?
Heather, I've said many times that there is a light at the end of the tunnel relative to this situation, but the light is far, far away. The country has been inundated, if you will, with low quality lithium-ion batteries that are potentially dangerous. And we know that regulations exist that can ensure that those battery packs are manufactured in a safe manner for their intended use. But it's going to take a long time for those regulations to take effect. They haven't even been made law yet, but they are on the books. Responsible companies are making sure that their battery packs are well engineered, well manufactured, tested, and certified. And that in the long run will tremendously help the situation. It's been proven that a properly designed battery pack is a safe battery pack. So we can rely on packs that have been well engineered, manufactured, and certified such that this fire situation will ultimately end. But again, as long as there's so many of these battery packs currently in circulation, our only defense against catastrophic failures is education. People need to know that these things represent a hazard, but that hazard can be addressed to a certain extent, such that if there is a failure, the failure does not catastrophically affect the users or neighbors or whatnot. So education right now is the single best tool that we have, and the more efforts that are put into it, the better. I mean, we've been doing this now for some years through the NBDA, is trying to instruct both retail dealers and consumers relative to the safe use, charging, storage, handling, repair of lithium-ion batteries, and I'm hopeful that that's had a positive impact. And the more effective communication, if you will, at elevating awareness of these potential situations is only going to help. And we need that level of help until we can reach a point whereby we can rely on those packs to be safe in our homes and helping power our mobility around town. So education is great. The more effective the education you get, the more widespread it is, the better.
Yeah, and I actually just shared this link yesterday with a retailer of ours who has found that several of the consumers, the riders in his area that he's selling bikes to, are recently being addressed with issues of storing those bikes in high-rise apartments, and there's issues with that. So having these websites, this consumer-facing material, does make it easier to provide information. And I think the more, as we continue to grow these resources, the better. Chad,
I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
Until there are quality battery packs in widespread circulation, this problem will persist. So we need to mitigate it via other means, and that's primarily safe usage, charging, taking into account that we understand the problem. We know what goes wrong, and we know how to minimize, if you will, the danger presented to users. Such that if they do fail, and the frequency of failure will be quite high, if they do fail in a manner that does not impact the health and safety of the user or people in the vicinity.
Another article on e-bikes relates to San Francisco. Reported by ABC News, San Francisco to set new rules for e-bike scooters powered by lithium-ion batteries. We know that San Fran is following the route of New York City in regards to this, and just in March announced a new set of standards for charging and storing batteries used to power mobility devices. Mike, from an HPS standpoint, I know we have the protocols from the NBDA that we already talked about, and from HPS that are available on the NBDA website. But what would you say is the leading most important standard?
A formal standard, Chad, it would certainly be UL 2271.
Okay.
That is an engineering standard, if you will. It refers to other standards that UL has developed and promulgated for cell safety, wire harness safety, battery management, effectiveness, et cetera, et cetera. That right now is in my opinion, the gold standard, if you will, to which lithium-ion battery packs for our intended purpose must comply. And as you know, municipalities are currently mandating that the products sold in their areas comply with this standard. If they do, again, we will achieve that level of safety because we're working with good product. But again, it's the same issue. The market is flooded with substandard packs that could not comply with that safety standard, packs that are obviously not certified to that safety standard. In addition to education, I guess the second most effective tool that we can use to mitigate the problem are the regulations such that New York and San Francisco are promulgating, which essentially mandates that you treat these things in a safe manner. You do not bring a battery pack into an apartment in a crowded apartment building and try charging it overnight, blocking the door. So, I guess it's safe to say that regulations of this nature are sort of forced education, if you will. In other words, if you're not going to take the initiative to do this on your own, we will force you to via regulations. Now, the effectiveness of the enforcement of those regulations remains to be seen. But the point is now it's law, and responsible citizens are aware of the law and need to react accordingly, because these are not protocols that enhance the safety of the battery pack. They're protocols that enhance the safety of the use of the battery pack. And if they mandate the fact that packs are charged outside of residential areas in an area whereby a failure is not going to adversely affect the living arrangements of all the people there, then that's the best interim step that we can take.
I would only add to that San Francisco is a follow-on to New York. There'll be other cities that'll be follow-ons to San Francisco. Each one is slightly different because these are ordinances that go into law and enforce in effect at different times. In the case of San Francisco, I believe it's 6 months down the road when it becomes effective. And Heather, the NBDA is already hearing from at least one big dealer of electric bikes in the San Francisco jurisdiction. And what's going on here is dealers that carry electric bikes are trying to understand the ordinance and also trying to comply with it. And so the NBDA is providing a much needed service in advising. Along with that, also is trying to advise the city council of the city of San Francisco to make sure that they are wording their ordinances so they provide the optimum available of hazard reduction and the lowest risk to consumers, particularly, as Mike said, in the multi-dwelling environments, in the condominiums, in the apartment houses, in places where you will have 2 to 3 to 300 people, and still being able to bring a well-tested, certified, in this case, 2271 is important for batteries, UL 2849 for complete e-bikes, and to make sure and ensuring that complying product are being brought into the environments with the maximum amount of safety for the consuming public.
And I'll also add to that, this is not a problem unique to New York City and San Francisco. It's affecting many municipalities across the United States, and many municipalities are reacting to it, contemplating local regulations of their own. There's activities undergoing in Florida. New York State now is looking at promulgating regulations that will apply to the entire state, not only New York City. And I read on a regular basis. I obviously study this stuff because it's of importance and significant consequence. There are cities all over the country now that are reporting issues associated with the failure of these substandard battery packs and the consequences of their failure. And it's not just the United States. Australia seems to be having a significant issue with poorly made lithium-ion battery packs that are causing fires and injury and death and destruction. Great Britain has had a significant issue with it that's reported in the media on a regular basis. And needless to say, China is suffering from it too. Obviously, the persistence or the proliferation of substandard battery packs probably is worst in China of all places. So it's not just unique to us. The fact that we need standards, clearly our focus is the United States and North America, but this has got to hold true for any application whereby the high energy and high power density of lithium-ion batteries needs to be harnessed in a very safe and reliable way. And the standards that are in existence, specifically UL 2271, can do that. And again, I like to draw the analogy to gasoline. Gasoline has more energy density than does a lithium-ion battery, yet we've managed to tame gasoline, generally speaking. I mean, we park our cars in our garages without a second thought. But gasoline still represents a hazard if it's not properly treated. So we will get to that point with lithium-ion batteries. We're not there yet. And in the meantime, there's a lot of potentially dangerous product in the market in the world. So it's an issue that's going to continue to haunt us until there's widespread adaptation and compliance with the standards that exist.
I do like to see more people continue to get involved, more experts come to the conversations. Our panel discussion we just had this past month, it's nice to have more people weighing in and people looking for solutions and wanting to actively get involved. And I thank the Human Powered Solutions team for the work you're doing. I want to just go over to this other article here for a moment. And this one caught my eye specifically because you mentioned that Human Powered Solutions should think that this article should be receiving more press. And the article is on the CPSC finally taking real action on electronic certificates of compliance. This was written by Steve Hansen, and we're talking about the important enforcement that the CPSC is looking to have. And bicycles would fall into this category that needs to be e-filed. And Jay, from what I understand in your summary, the issue seems to be if this rule goes into effect, our industry will have 120 days to comply. And the big question mark is, are we talking about this? Are we ready? I mean, Jay, give us a little bit more here just so we all understand what's happening.
Well, Steve Hansen wrote an excellent article that Brain republished, but it's Steve's lawyer. So this is a long lawyerly article. You have to go through it several times, I think, to get all of the pieces out of it, all the nuggets. But it boils down to this. 16 years ago, the Congress of the United States passed a law that basically said Consumer Product Safety Commission has to require electronic filing of certificates of compliance to regulations, which means you put those certificates in to an electronic system that CPSC is to develop, and you do it at the point where the certs are issued, or the certificates are issued to you. So it covers goods coming in transit, coming through the ports, a product that's in the ports, entering the customs territory of the United States. 16 years ago. Well, what happened in the intervening 16 years is the administrations that were in power determined that they simply wouldn't push it. They wouldn't move it forward. They wouldn't provide the funding for it. They would not encourage the commission. At this point, the current sitting commissioners have determined they're going to follow what Congress had passed and the president signed as law. And so they're moving forward with the rulemaking that they will publish, that everybody that's subject to a federal standard, safety standard in particular, in our case, 16 CFR 1512, is going to have to file electronic registration or electronic filings of that certification being issued. Steve is right. And by the way, this will go into effect. This is another case where CPSC is moving forward to simply do what they were told by a law, by act of Congress signed by, I believe, President Bush, one of the Bushes back then. And so it's going to happen. And when it does, there'll be about 120 days for the industry to comply with the rule They certainly can respond to it, but I don't know that there's going to be any leeway or fudge room or wiggle room here. It's going to be simple. The commission is going to require it. The industry is going to have to, as Steve said, find out how to file, what's involved in the filing process. The key here is they're going to have certificates of compliance to 16 CFR 1512. Now, there's an argument certainly to be made that 16 CFR 1512, the federal bike reg, the mandatory federal mechanical bike reg, is old, it's antiquated, it's out of date. And the commission is updating it as we speak. They're now on the same timeline as developing the mandatory regulations for lithium-ion batteries and for e-bikes. And those are all in process right now. The timeline says that we're going to see what they have proposed by the end of this year. We're going to be allowed to make comments on it, and they're going to have a final reg published in 2025. But in between is this requirement for every company, brand, and product that's regulated, covered by a standard. And so the bike industry is going to have to back into you got to have certificates for 16 CFR 1512. You're going to have to follow the electronic means of filing those certs so that the commission and customs and Homeland Security can do inspections. It's going to increase the inspection of the imported product coming into this country to make sure it meets a standard. Now, again, those standards are going to be, we think, fairly easy to meet because they're not as stringent as they were back 20 years ago, but they are still mandatory federal standards. This will get the industry into practice for what's coming, which will be a greatly enhanced, greatly improved, and broadly expanded mandatory federal standard by 2025. This rule of making sure you electronically file certificates of compliance will be in place this year. And the industry is going to have to figure out how it's going to contact CPSC, learn about what's required, how they get registered, how they get on the electronic filing, and how that's followed. And by the way, the NBDA can tap into it and see who's got certs for 16 CFR 1512 for the mechanical mandatory portion of the bike reg. Sorry to go on and say such length, but I do recommend that, number one, everybody that can read the article. That's Steve's article. It was republished by Brain. And number two, the serious question you're asking, Heather, what is the industry doing? How are we preparing for this? This is near term. It's not going to go away. It's not going to change before we have the elections. This is something the industry is going to have to figure out how to comply with this year.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Jay.
So let's, yeah, important information. Let's jump over.
That's like a dull thud, but that's exactly what it is.
Not mellow.
Yeah. Unmellow.
Let's jump over to the health of our suppliers. The article on Merida, their sales being down. Another article on Shimano announcing sales 30% off the mark. How are suppliers doing? Any general sense? Any ideas why continued reports of declines?
Because they're not doing well.
Yeah.
I think I share my frustration with our readers about the fact that I don't think the American trade publication nor the American industry is reporting all that's going on. Part in the trade relative to the suppliers, the health and welfare of the industry financially. I know this is difficult to find because the companies are mostly private. They do not have to divulge. They can make announcements like Trek did. They went public with an announcement that said that the president of the company and the family had decided that they were going to right size. And that's indicative of, yes, there's a problem, and now they're going to have to figure out how to deal with it. We're seeing in Europe far more coverage of public companies like Shimano, public companies like Giant, public companies like Merida, although those companies are still very difficult to extract meaningful information for those of us in the English-speaking world, because while they're public companies, Shimano is on the Tokyo Exchange, so everything they publish is in Japanese, has to be translated. Giant is on the Taipei exchange, as is Merida. So that's Mandarin. That has to be translated. That's even further away. But to answer your question directly, what we're publishing and gleaning out of the reports is overall on a global basis, the large players like Shimano. And I think I make the point in the article that, or my comments, the analysis about the article that you're referring to, that it can be rightly said in our industry, as goes Shimano, so goes the bike industry. This gives you a pretty good idea of the health and welfare of the industry going forward, because Shimano is the predominant supplier of componentry all the way through mass version product. You walk into Walmart, take a look at the Walmart product that's on their racks, and you'll find Shimano derailleurs. So Shimano shifting systems and Shimano component go through all of the industry, trickle through the whole of every channel. So the quest to find out how things are going, to answer your question, Chad, becomes opinion based on people like myself who work daily at trying to read articles and delve into this. And I talk to other people in other spheres. I regularly talk to an individual who's in the research business in England, whose company is doing research in 5 or 6 countries in continental Europe, and get his view and what he sees. And then I email a friend of mine in a finance company, financially related company in Taipei, and try to get from him reads of the stuff that's published from the companies like Giant and Merida. But still, it's opinion. There is very little that we can really glean. And I'm not an investigative reporter, as Fred and I have discussed at length. There's only so much that I will pull out and publish because I'm confident in it. But an investigative reporter, a guy like Mark Sani, if he had the funding and we could turn him loose on this, would probably dig into, but the bottom line would be the same. The industry is going through a bad patch. The brands and manufacturers, public and private, large and small, are having financial difficulty. Good companies that make profit, like Scott, that we reported last month, are owned by large corporations, larger conglomerates, who've had to put large amounts of money in the tunes of over $200 million in working capital into these profitable entities they own, like Scott, just for that company to make payroll. The problem being liquidity. There's not enough revenue coming into the companies in order to drive the financial needs in the face of the higher costs of loans, the interest rates being paid today, and so on. So you could get into the minutiae as I do, but it still comes out to the same thing. The financial health and welfare, with few exceptions, is not good at this point in time. No, I'm not saying it's in dire distress. I'm just saying it's not good. It's under tension at this juncture.
Yeah, it is interesting to keep an eye on all the reports that are coming out, the news articles that are being shared. I was having a email exchange with Bob Marjovikas from Specialized, who was sharing some unit numbers, and really the basis of our conversation was that ridership numbers are down. We need to get people back on bikes, back in our stores. Fred, I'm interested to see what you're thinking about supplier health. Like if you had to have a crystal ball, or just where you're at in this kind of, we're saying that we're not investigative journalists, and that Jay could snoop all day, and, but what are you thinking, Fred, just from your history in the industry and what you see going on now?
I wish them well. We are, as an industry and ecosystem, retailers don't generally manufacture their own products, so we need a robust supply network of companies that are vibrant and creative and healthy. Maybe some of the mistakes of the past will be overcome going forward, because it only makes sense in the marketplace to do so. But I guess I don't have a whole lot to recommend to the suppliers. I think I mentioned this on our last call, that I find it fascinating that the inventory glut is at the supply side, but not so much at retail, according to the stats. So to me, maybe it's putting a happy face on something, but that shows me retailers are doing a good job in an area that the suppliers are not yet. And maybe there's some learning that can come from all this. And maybe we've had an industry with very inefficient inventory management for a long time. Maybe tightening up will repair some of those sort of systemic problems.
Yep. Yep.
So over in retailer land, there's two articles I know both struck Heather and I. I want to get into the first topic, and I'll let Heather take the lead on the Walmart article. Both present some large takeaways for our retailer listeners. Matt Phillips, writer at Bicycling, penned an article, "To my fellow cyclists, quit the e-bike hate," he writes. "My entire damn life, I've noticed how we tend to us and them, other riders who don't fit our vision of what a cyclist should look like. We form cliques and freeze out others who we feel don't fit in. We make assumptions about someone's fitness or skill based on equipment. It doesn't even consider how much that person loves the sport or how much they give back to cycling." So I thought, wow, this is a powerful, and it brings back to our salespeople on the sales floor and that important interaction with every customer. Right now, in a time when the consumer public has chosen to reduce their visits to bike shops, attitude is absolutely everything. Fred, I'm interested in your take on this article and thoughts for retailers.
Well, I'm not sure I have a whole lot to offer about the apparent tendency by human beings to form groups and to dislike the other. That just seems to be part of our nature as Homo sapiens. And I don't think it's good, but I can't do anything about it. So, but as it applies to the bike shop, I think maybe this would be a little perspective. I think forming sort of clubbish, cultish subgroups within cycling has a long history. Drop the Attitude has long been mentioned that bike shops should drop the attitude. And a lot of times it's from suppliers who say, bike shops, they got to drop the attitude. And by the way, pay their bills. You know, and I'm saying, yes, you know, it's good to drop the attitude if you have one, but excuse my bluntness here, but I'm calling BS. The bike shops are really pretty good these days. If you compare a bike shop retail experience with most retail brick and mortar experiences in this country, bike shops are better than average and in some cases outstanding. And they've had to be because they've had to adopt practices to survive. I can't imagine another retail industry that I've been into or can't envision where they've done so much better than us. And so I think in my mind anyway, I'm putting aside the sort of pejorative, oh, bike shops are this, bike shops are that. We've all on this call been in a lot of bike shops that are really good. And so, yes, drop the attitude. I think, you know, you mentioned Walmart, you know, and Walmart does some good things, but the bike shop experience, we have a bicycle culture. You know, as I well learned when I first started riding more seriously with road riders, and my name's Fred. You know, it's like, what do you do with that? You know, it's like, but that's the nature of. So I think for a retailer to preserve some of the richness and history and passion of the cycling culture without the judgment and the hate is really important. But I think most retailers are there. Most bike shops are there already. We're doing that already. Most customers have a pretty good experience. They're greeted by friendly people, interesting and creative products. And if you're as a consumer going into a bike shop these days, those kinds of bike shops, I mean, yeah, there are outliers that are bad, but for the most part, if you've got a problem and you're intimidated, I'm sorry, and I'm not a retailer, so it's easy for me to say, but that's on you. You know, toughen up. I mean, my gosh, we have really good retailers here to serve your cycling needs. But the consumer has to take some responsibility for being a little more assertive asking some more questions. If you're uncomfortable walking into a retail store, there's something wrong with you. Sorry.
Well, I think there's another aspect to this. I agree with what Fred said. I think most, especially bicycle retailers, are doing their absolute best to be friendly and to be accepting and to work with their staff to make sure they're dropping the attitude. On the other hand, among the good shops, there's even those that are very accepting. There's something that came up in the safety panel this past week, Heather and Chad. I think you were on that as well as Mike. Uh, there was a representative from a major brand that at one point in the discussion wanted to make the point that the consumer for e-bikes are different. The consumers that buy e-bikes are different than the customer we're used to. And so I think that becomes part of the equation, that the COVID and that whole period with all its upheavals and all of the things that occurred brought us a whole different type of customer, a whole different demographic of customers. And in some cases, the NBDA research showed during the COVID, up to a third of the consumers were new to cycling, had never ridden a bicycle before, knew nothing of the culture, that came into a bike shop, purchased a product, went off and rode it, and in turn were different. Now, part of this goes to what shocked me, which is the different look. The moped style. Fred and I and Mike have discussed this at length. The moped style, the motorcycle moped style of electric bicycle coming primarily out of California is not unlike what we saw with bicycle motocross coming out of the first bike boom, the legitimate bike boom in 71 to 75, going into the 80s with BMX broaching and bicycle motocross coming off of motorcycle motocross and creating a whole genre of product that exists to this day, a whole group of cyclists, mostly younger cyclists. But in the e-bike world, we've got a block of customers that are different than what we look at in our industry as bicyclists. So I think that's part of what bicycling, what that author was getting at. And Fred's right. Most bike shops pick it up right away, talk to their staff and say, look, there's a change. There's a different customer. Be more accepting. Be particularly sensitive to the fact that you're going to get women coming into bike shops. And please do not condescend, which unfortunately for a lot of males doesn't just stick on the bike industry, as Fred said. It's just a thing with males. Drop it. Drop the attitude. We cannot afford to offend or not accept everybody that walks through the door of a retail store today. And the bike shops need to understand that as I've said for decades, and Fred has heard me say this ad nauseum, that I think the greeter for a bike shop should be mom. It's really that fundamental. And I think that's more true today because we've got a big chunk of the public that don't understand our culture at all, the good and the bad of it. They just want a bike, and the bike they want is something we never envisioned as a bike, but it is. So
yeah, it's very interesting. We're getting our secret shopper report. So part of our Retailer Excellence Award for 2024 is retailers can opt in to purchase a secret shopper report, meaning that a secret shopper will come visit a location. And I've been reading the reports, and there's a theme that I'm noticing. I mean, there's some retailers who are just knocking it out of the water. Amazing job, great customer service. But there is a theme, a trend, that the customers are not being invited back. They're not being shown multiple bikes, or they're not being qualified. So asked, where are you going to ride? What research have you done? So that is a trend that I'm seeing far too often in the reports. And that kind of scares me, not being invited back, not asked where they're going to ride. Not even being asked what brought them to the store. So I think we have an opportunity here to really double down on our staff training and get our staff to ask the right questions. And then a reminder to invite people back in. It's not just solving the need they walked in the door that day for. It's creating a cyclist and helping them in their journey. So yeah, I just thought I would add that in there because I think that's part of it too. regardless what they look like, we have to give amazing customer service every single time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so Chad mentioned that there's an article that I wanted to get into about Walmart. So I thought this article was quite interesting, and I want to dive into it because I think we might be able to pull some specific things out that retailers who are listening could use. Walmart is continuing to report sales growth. And the article is titled Walmart Tops Street as Sales, Earnings Rise on E-com Growth and Holiday Traffic. And this was reported by Chain Store Age. So Walmart store sales saw an increase of 4%, which was more than they expected. Those sales were led by grocery, but then also health and wellness category. General merchandise sales declined a little bit, but the number of transactions increased 4%, and the average ticket price just down a tiny, tiny bit. Overall, global e-com sales soared 23%, and yeah, I think there's strength in the pickup and delivery. So Walmart has kind of bucked the recent trend of cost cutting as well. So we have a lot of people who are cutting costs. They are looking to expand and open more stores. I think 150 US stores to be remodeled or expanded in the next 5 years. They're also giving their store managers more pay. I think it's interesting because Walmart, in addition to being the largest retailer in America, is one of the largest retailer of bicycles in America. And we have a relationship with them because we host our summit in Bentonville, Arkansas, home of their global headquarters. And I've been in conversations about the way they do business. Very intriguing. Interested to hear, Jay, Mike, Fred, what you think are some of the things that Walmart is doing that specialty retailers, should follow suit on or could follow suit on.
Well, the times have changed, and particularly the three of us, Mike, Fred, myself, go back to a couple of eras of change in specialty retailing and also mass merchant retailing. If you go back to a publication called Bicycle Journal, and the publisher of that publication of that magazine, he wrote, I believe, a book that lambasted Walmart. Fred will remember the name of both the individual and the title of the book, because Walmart, under the original founder, under Sam Walton, was pretty brutal. They had a philosophy of slash and burn when they went into a market. They put small retailers down, took them out of business, and it was part and parcel of their way of doing business. We're now into the third generation ownership of that company that Heather and Chad and Mike and I think have seen going down to Bentonville. Fred, I don't know that you've been to Bentonville, but when you go to Bentonville and you're involved in the bike business, you're going to rub elbows with one or more of the Walmart grandchildren, with Stuart or Thomas in particular. They have been at People for Bikes BLCs. There have been senior Walmart executives at the NBDA summits. If you, as Mike and I did, walk into one of the stores they own in Bentonville, the grandchildren own in Bentonville, it's the Rafa shop. Now, I know that they've since sold Rafa from the time we were in there, but when Mike and I were down in Bentonville this last trip, we went into the Rafa shop, talked to the manager, and she said, "Oh, you just missed, I can't remember if it was Stuart or Thomas. He was just in here." So if you go to Bentonville, you're in the bike business, it doesn't take long before you realize that there's another generation of Waltons. My daughter has worked, I'm switching gears here now. My daughter's worked for Walmart for 15 years. She's now a lead, a store lead in the fresh department. So she comes home and we talk about what's happening. The culture is changing and the leadership is changing. And they have more recently become much more friendly to small business. They've also become much more friendly to the concept that they've got to figure out how to retain their employees. So I won't bore you with all the detail here, but generally Walmart has shifted approach, attitude with the community, with the outreach, with the relationship with other businesses, because the times have changed. They're smart. They realize that they're going where the customer's going, that they need to bring in customers to keep the economic engine running. So this is self-serving, but I think it's beneficial, as you point out, Heather, I think it's beneficial for the NBDA to also understand the changes that are occurring. Michael, remember when I stood at a podium talking to Schwinn dealers as vice president marketing, as vice president product safety and governmental affairs, what came out of my mouth was, we've got a problem with cheap disposable bicycles sold by Walmart, because that is what the fact was back in the 80s. But today, in 2024, you're talking about a different time, a different attitude, a different approach. And therefore, I think it's time for the specialty bike retail channel, in addition to all the other changes that we're going to have to make that weren't considered cool 20 years ago. They're part of it's got to be mellow going forward. There may be a natural alliance, but also an understanding of the current generation of the Walmart ownership is promoting bicycling. They're promoting their own brand of product. That product is more sophisticated. It is also, they're much more aware that they've got to take care of that customer if they want that customer to keep coming in and spending money with them.
The book that Jay was referencing, I think, was at least part of the title was The Strip Mining of America.
Yeah.
And that was what Walmart was doing.
Bill Quinn.
Bill Quinn. So I think, though, they've already finished their strip mining. They have their locations. They have cleared out main streets. Walmart, maybe was the first, but other, this trend towards mass merchant and all the technology that we're dealing with these days, Walmart still remains number one, but they also have challenges. The times have changed, and small downtown main streets are really, more, the consumer is better served in some ways by a Walmart or something like that, in the consumer's opinion, and that's the thing that counts. So I think they're in a different phase of their business. It seems to me they're no longer expanding like so aggressively, and now it's other things that they're really good at.
I'll just take this second, since we're talking about Walmart. I'll make a plug for the NBDA Retailer Summit happening in Bentonville towards the end of May. Last year, Walmart representatives were in attendance and will be again this year. Sitting at the same table allows for important conversations to happen. The agenda is not quite ready, but it's coming out real soon, and it's going to be really exciting this year. Really looking forward to it.
Thanks, Chad. Yeah, that's going to be great. We have more retailers actually each day signing up. So looking forward to that event. All right, let's wrap it up. Fred, I'm coming over to you. It's April 2024. I know you love this question. Specific advice for retailers to focus on this month.
I mean, this segment of our podcast, I usually try to come up with something a little out of left field. This time, I don't really have one. It strikes me that if I were a retailer and I'm a cyclist, I love spring. Oh my gosh, it's like things are starting to open up, and it's the season is right around the corner. May is bike month. We're right on edge. So I would just throw that out there that, boy, it's about to start, and I hope you've planned, you're ready for the season, the so-called busy time, and now it's going to hit. And if you're busy, great, manage it, use your plan. If you're not, go out and make some busy. That's retailing also. It's not just waiting, as you all know, for customers to come in, but it's a plan, and it's create. You've got to make action, make things happen. And that's the good retailers that I referenced before. They do that. They do that year round. I mean, it's not a mystery. So I'm excited for the season personally.
Excellent. I love that. That's great. Thanks, Fred. All right, Chad, where are we going next?
We're going to suppliers. Jay, where should our suppliers be focused going into spring?
Well, that's an interesting question. At this point, I think they need to certainly focus on good business management and survival. For those suppliers in our business that deal with specialty bike retail, with bike shops, there is, and I don't have to tell you guys, there's a great deal of distrust in the channel. It doesn't need to exist. I think suppliers need to think very seriously about opening a dialogue, a meaningful dialogue with their dealers, being honest with specialty bike retailers, and seeking the help of specialty bike retailers in not only surviving for both of them, but also the future. How do they grow together? I know that the idea of partnership and the term partnership in our business is hackneyed. It's distrusted, but I think that goes to the issue of, as Fred said, we should be focusing on the good things, on what we can do, on what we can do together. And I think that collaboration, honesty, transparency, and making sure that you've got good, meaningful dealer programs, and more importantly, fair, straightforward, honest, specialty bicycle retailer agreements, authorized dealer agreements that are fair and equitable to both parties are part and parcel of what needs to be done to grow this industry going forward.
Yes.
Jay, I love that.
Yeah, I love it too. I'm like over here. Yeah, you're giving me goosebumps, and it makes me want to just highlight that we are working on our April bicycle industry retailer and supplier best practices panel right now. That NBDA has sent out to our members at large, requesting topics to come forward and discuss at this quarterly platform that's organized to facilitate global level positive financial health for both suppliers and retailers. So this is an opportunity for us to have a controlled environment, to have the tough conversations, to address retailer health and how suppliers can best support that so we're all stronger. So definitely check that out. That's happening April 16th, and there's information on the NBDA website. Mike, over to you. E-bikes, focus for retailers, focus for the industry, focus for everyone.
You know, with these last couple of sets of comments, I think our conversation here is mellowing.
Yeah.
and I'm going to throw a blanket on that, which is ironic because that's what I'm going to talk about. Obviously, I'm looking forward to the day when I can talk about something other than battery problems, and I know that day is out there. But right now, I have a tidbit of news that I shared with the E-Bike Safety and Standards Committee last week. And that's the fact that research is coming out that indicates that the use of these battery charging bags and fire blankets for use to mitigate a battery fire actually exacerbate the fire. There's a number of proponents out there that say charge your battery in this bag or cover it with a blanket. And if it does fail, it'll fail in a significantly safer way. That's not true. It turns out that those methods actually make the fire worse because they hinder heat transfer, which accelerates cell-to-cell propagation in a battery fire, which basically results in a more dangerous situation. So again, I hate to be a wet blanket, no pun intended, but I do want to point out that retailers need to be careful when they're considering that option in their shop. Because in fact, the preliminary research, and again, this is based on one report, and reports oftentimes are overturned in the future, but the general thinking right now is don't use a battery bag, don't use a blanket, because it makes things worse. So again, apologize for closing on a less than happy note, but it's something I think retailers need to be aware of. That is not a safe fire mitigation strategy. So please consider some of the other recommendations that we've made via the NBDA regarding safe storage and charging of batteries in your shop. So maybe Jay or Fred could say something that get that mojo back. But right now, I guess I have to close on more advice relative to keeping your shop and your employees and your neighbors safe.
Well, I'm glad you bring these things up, Mike. Personally, And because I've been challenged, stop the hate. It's spring.
Okay, good. I hate battery fires, so stop the fire.
Well, we'll try and bring it back here in the closing. Such a wealth of information. Can't thank you all enough for coming on and sharing your expertise with our listeners so that they are able to stay up to date on all the important topics facing the industry. Thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all. Thank you all. See you next month. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Ciao.
Thank you for listening to Bicycle Retail Radio. This podcast is designed specifically for the bicycle industry, dedicated to strengthening our retailers and cycling community. If it is your first episode, we urge you to take the time and listen to our past episodes.
The NBDA values the importance of deep interpersonal connections, and our Retailer Summit is designed to be a catalyst for just that. Attending the Retailer Summit in May ensures you meet the right people who know the bicycle industry, respect your business, and want to help you grow, both personally and professionally. It's an easy way to take your business to the next level through networking, engaging with panelists and speakers, problem solving with your fellow attendees, followed by ample riding time on world-class trails. Go to nbda.com/retailer summit for more information and to get your tickets today.